It's Stevivor's Friendly Fire Show, episode 219 for the midpoint of November 2022. Happy birthday to my mother, whose birthday is on Remembrance Day, and it's really easy to remember because of that. It's also probably like a sort of somber day otherwise, so a bit weird, I guess. I don't know. Hi, Tamerlan.
Oh.
Hope you're enjoying your age. Hi, Ben. You're Ben Salter. Sorry, I'm Steve Wright. You're Ben Salter. I'm really bad at this. Welcome.
Happy birthday to Steve's mum. We need to be more uplifting than that. Good on her. Another year. And we're back. We're here again.
Feels like we've never left.
It's a busy week. It feels like we never left. It's a busy time in games right now, Steve. There's so much going on. There's games to play. You've been playing a lot. You've been playing the Chant, which is, you can read your review right now. We couldn't read it last week, but it's on the site now.
It's good. It's the first from Brass Token, which is a new Canadian studio. It's their first game. For random reasons, I thought it was going to be like Supermassive's The Quarry or The Dark Pictures, which is also, there's a new one coming out in like a week or less. It's nothing like that. It's more like a survival horror game, third person in like the Resident Evil kind of vein, but relies upon a lot of weird insanity style things like Eternal Darkness on GameCube, which is like an underrated gem. So it's really
they should re-release that.
There's a lot of good about it. There's a lot of like rough edges around it where I think that it's worth your time and it's worth playing. But I think the next game from Brass Token will be far better. It's also relatively short. I think I finished the first playthrough under 5 hours. There's an achievement for finishing under 4. And I did my second playthrough in 2.5. So...
Well, it sounds good. You sold me. Short game. Interesting to play.
Stories all over the shop, but like the mechanics and stuff are fairly good. Read the review. Check it out. We don't talk about games for too long if we haven't both played them. So sort of on that vein, because I still haven't gotten around to it. Game Pass and the PS5, both current gen consoles have just introduced Return to Monkey Island in what is undoubtedly the shortest console exclusivity period ever. So take that, Switch people.
Well, now you can play it. I mean, it's a very good game. I gave it a 9. I recommend you play it. It's you don't need to have played the first 2 games. You might as well. They might be on Game Pass. I don't think they are actually, but they're backwards compatible. So easy way to play the special editions, or they're super cheap on Steam. Weirdly enough, they're not on Switch, so you couldn't have played the first 2 games on Switch, but for that brief, 2 months, 1 month, you could play just the third game on Switch. Anyhow, doesn't matter. It's now on all platforms, so I played it on PC, one of the few games, because it was one of the only options.
Because it would work.
On PC. It runs fine. It works great. But I dabbled briefly with the controller to see how it works, and that was all there. So, which kind of makes me wonder why they didn't just launch on everything. I think that was just a small studio; they weren't ready to get it on every platform.
Terrible toy
maybe
box.
It was only like $35.
So, okay, question: Would you now that this is on Game Pass and it's free for you, free air quotes because of your subscription? Will you play it on Xbox for the achievements?
I will play it. There's 2 modes. There's like a normal and a hard, and I played normal to get it done for review. I'll probably play the harder mode. The hard is just the puzzles are a bit more elaborate. What you need to do is a bit more out there. I think it's still got that help system in that it's kind of a step-by-step. In the first hint is super vague, and the next one is slightly more detailed. And eventually it's just like, go do this thing, which is what the older games don't have. Like, I think they do have a hint system, but not to that degree. Super good. Like, you can't really get stuck and you don't have to use that at all. You can totally ignore it. My point being, I think it would make the hard mode, which I didn't have time for, bearable, because there's going to be some stuff which is just totally out there, which doesn't make any sense, and you could, like, no sane person could ever figure out. That's classic Monkey Island. And then the normal mode doesn't really have that. It's more logical puzzles. You still don't have to think about them. But yes, I think I'd play the harder mode, having played it once. I wouldn't recommend that mode as your first playthrough.
Unless you use a guide, which there will be absolutely like 50 million of them. But there's no fun in that. You don't need
to, because the in-game hint is like better than any guide. It just kind of crumb feeds you little tidbits until it tells you what to do.
Now, I'm not sure if Monkey Island 1 or 2 on Xbox 360 are on Game Pass or not, but I went, because you've been talking about it for months now, I went back and I had one of them, and I had to buy the other one. And I'm not sure if I already bought the other or if it was part of Game Pass, but I have both of them. I'm currently collecting pirate insults in the original Monkey Island.
Yes.
It's really good, though, so I'm keen to play those two and then go to third. I was kind of waiting for it to get on Xbox. I thought I had more time, but this is the time frame is escalated quickly. If you haven't played Thimbleweed Park, you absolutely should. It's a terrible toy box game. It's very like Twin Peaks inspired, which of course is right up my alley. But it's that kind of point and click style adventure, just like with weird, quirky humor, and I think you would enjoy it. And I don't think it's on Game Pass or anything, but it's relatively cheap by this point on your platform of choice.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah.
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the huge system seller of this week, God of War Ragnarok. As we won't get into, it's a post-launch thing from us, so we're jumping into it.
That's good.
This week, and we'll have thoughts on it soonish.
We'll give you guys, the listeners, time to play it so that when we chat about it, you've played it as well. That's what we're going to do here. So we'll be maybe next week or maybe the week after. We'll be maybe even the week after that. We'll be chatting God of War. We want to play a big solid chunk and maybe give it a good chunk of podcasts. Not that we used to do years ago a spoiler cast. I don't think we're going to do spoiler cast level, but we might give it like a good 80% of the podcast spoiler free.
Yeah. I'm also in Indonesia the last 2 weeks of November, so I'm going to have to figure out what we do. I think I can just take stuff with me and pretend I have good internet. We'll figure it out. Otherwise, you can just maybe do a solo podcast talking to yourself about God of War spoilers or not. We'll figure it out.
Spoiler-free chat with myself. Could be good. I can just do it. It's like the driving to work thoughts of what I think of God of War, like just the nonsense that you think of on the train, on the bus. Well, that's what people want.
There you go. I rather enjoyed the first one. I'm very excited about the second one. Not your solo podcast. I mean God of War. So keen to check it out and talk to you about it and see what other people think as well. But we can't say anything yet because like literally we can't see anything yet. It's impossible. So let's talk about things that we can discuss. That was a horrible segue. Let's talk about Capcom's recent-ish Resident Evil 4 remake reveal. Where we actually got some proper gameplay and chainsaws and
good.
Ashley and Leon's hair. Just so dreamy. Sorry, I got distracted. What did you think of what we saw?
Perfect, basically. So I want them to essentially take the mechanics of Resident Evil 2, keep the bits of Resident Evil 4 that you don't want to update to ruin it, and kind of keep the vibe, but make it all less brown. Like Resident Evil 4, looking back now, it's all too brown. And I think they've addressed that. It looks good. It still has that weird, like Resident Evil 4 has a certain vibe about it, about the enemies when that like first guy kind of screamed and Leon's trying to figure out, oh, what's wrong with that guy? Like these aren't zombies or whatever. Like it seems to have captured that whole spirit. It looks like it's kind of got it, but maybe they've modernized it a little bit, but not too much. Like it needs some of that clunk. And the fact that Leon can shoot and walk at the same time, like that's going to change things quite a lot. But it looks a little bit awkward still, which is what you need in this type of game. So yeah, pretty much, I'm super pumped for it. It looks like everything I expected, and probably the one I was most worried about. In that we've played so many versions of Resident Evil 4. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's not the same, like it's a remake and it's an overhaul, but it's not as old as the other games are, and it's not as big of a leap. Like Resident Evil 2 to Resident Evil 2 Remake, totally different game. It's still similar. But I think it's a super fine line, and I think they're right on that line. Like I think they've nailed it.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I'm most concerned about is that it's in 2 remake, 3 remake, Village, and RE7, is that they're all the protagonists of those games are rookie cops or civilians, or Ethan, who's ultra civilian. So you can run and shoot, but like when you want to shoot, you're better off planting your feet, and like you have to wait for the cursor to kind of like zero in on what you're shooting at. And that's kind of the balance between tank controls and running and shooting, and it makes sense. But if you're like Leon Kennedy, who's now like working for the president, I want that to be a little bit less. Like I want him to feel like he's not the boulder punching Chris Redfield action hero, but like I want him to feel more capable than Leon in Resident Evil 2, if that makes sense. And giving him a knife to like stop a chainsaw doesn't cover that. I want him to be more agile, and I want the shots to feel a little bit easier to pull off. Because the thing about these new Resident Evil games is that you have to be very precise, and like stopping and shooting a zombie that's slowly coming at you is different than like the Ganados like running at you in a village. So if they can find that balance, if that makes sense, I'll be very happy. But everything I saw looks like just impeccable. I'm so very excited for this game.
And so where do they go from here? The rumor is Code Veronica would be the next remake, but they've kind of said, yeah, maybe. But that's also what they said about Resident Evil 3 and Resident Evil 4. So that makes me think, yes, definitely.
It feels different though. Like this is like, I guess maybe if you want it, and people have been clamoring for that remake for years. Theoretically, the fan base, the real core fan base, which I begrudgingly am part of, would have wanted the Code Veronica remake before RE5 or RE4, sorry, because that's where it sits in the timeline. And I think Capcom is more just like, now we want, we've got 6 and 7 and 8, and we've put out 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. We'll do 4. Maybe they'll do Resident Evil 5 first. I hope they don't, because I don't think 5 needs a remake. I don't think 4 really needs a remake. I think Code Veronica does.
No, it doesn't.
But I don't think it's going to happen.
Not to get into our big discussion of when do things need a remake, I think it's very close Resident Evil 4 in not necessarily needing it. But having said that, what they've come up with an archetype for Resident Evil remakes, and it's not that. So I think it does fit it enough. I'm not sure that 5 does. I think 5 went more action heavy, and I think it was a bit more modern in movement because it was in the HD era. I think maybe that's the line. Like Resident Evil 4 was originally an SD game that's just been overhauled so many times, like Marge Simpson's dress. Like
you can play it on your fridge, surely, at this point.
Yeah. That's it. And the thing that I'm not sure why they haven't done, and maybe they'll do it eventually, is Resident Evil 1 hasn't really had a proper remake. Like it had its GameCube remake, but that was only a few years after the PS1 game. And that's then been given a HD remaster. And it plays well, but like a full remake of that would make sense, surely.
Well, yeah. Like it's almost the remake to have defined what remakes are, depending on when you're looking at how this works. Like it was completely, it wasn't different in terms of mechanics changed. It was still, solid static camera angles, and they added a whole bunch of stuff to it, but like just looked so much better than the first. It wasn't just like up-res skins or something. It was like, no, we went and redid all this, like a proper remake, not remaster. I feel like, I don't know. The DNA of Resident Evil has changed so much. It's kind of like that's the last tenuous like grasp on what it was for people who were sort of getting into it. And I know that would be very jarring to play that and then the new RE2 and the new RE3 because it's a completely different thing. But like that's the roots of this entire franchise come from that. And I think that should be celebrated to some extent. But also, I wouldn't mind a remake of RE.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's keeping that roots of how the original games played and what they were meant to be. But on the flip side is if you were getting into Resident Evil now, I think you skip it. I think it's just too different. It's too hard to get into it. You're better off just going straight to 2.
Watch some gameplay. Oh, like yeah. I tend to agree as much as it pains me to say. But then in the same, I was going to say, like, if you're super dead set on this franchise and you love it, but you're relatively new to it, and you've played the RE2 and the RE3 and you're excited for RE4, like Code Veronica is one of the better older versions of this franchise. It was first released to Dreamcast. It was the first RE game that was like fully 3D rendered, so it wasn't just like rendered backgrounds that you sort of walk through and they try to get the geometry right. It was like everything was properly physically in the environment. Decent story that they expanded for Code Veronica X, introducing one of the long time series villains. But yeah, it tank controls and the like, so it'd be very hard to get into that game after playing 2 and 3, which means it should get remade. So if it should get remade, so should the first one. So my argument is moot.
Look, I think they'll do them all. They seem to sell really well, and they're relatively easy to make from the sense that they can do them in about 18 months. So I think they will do them all.
Well, like, I'll tell you what, 15-year-old me was like, I need to find out what happens next in this expansive epic about these nobodies versus Umbrella. And then RE4 came out back in the day. It was like, oh, Umbrella's done. Don't worry about it. And like, that was the whole story I was wanting to have resolved, and they resolved it off screen. So I've changed my ways. I don't really care about those kind of narrative arcs anymore in video games. I just appreciate the gameplay.
I started with Resident Evil 4. So when I eventually heard about this Umbrella, I'm like, what is this? This is not Resident Evil.
You mean Tricell, don't you? Was it Tricell? Yeah.
Well, speaking of first games in series which no one has played, or it's too hard to play now, I should say, The Witcher 1 is getting a remake, full remake. So that's one of the many Witcher games we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. One of them turned out to be a remake of the first game, and I don't know how you play this. I think if you wanted to play it right now, not the remake, you'd be playing it on PC only. Like the second game's on Xbox and PS3 maybe.
The Witcher Enhanced Edition, I think, is free right now. So if you're on PC, download GOG Galaxy, GOG, Good Old Games Galaxy, and I think it's still free. I already owned it, so I couldn't check to make sure it was still a valid offer. But even if it's not, I think it's like $5 anyway. So it's decidedly not The Witcher 3 in terms of gameplay and mechanics and everything else. So I guess I'm assuming that they'll kind of Witcher 3 this one, or will they kind of keep it's almost like an RTS of sorts, the original Witcher. It's very, very different. And I don't think it's going to stay like that.
I assume they're going to make it more like Witcher 3, way more accessible. I don't know much about it, to be honest, but I would think it's using some of the core original story, which is somewhat being lost in that it's in this hard to access only on certain download platforms on PC. So no one really plays it. It makes sense to remake it.
Yeah, well, and it's a CD Projekt Red published game. Well, I guess maybe not, depending on where you are in the world. I think it'll be a Bandai Namco one in Australia for the relationship that they have. But anyway, that's beside the point. It's a third-party game from Fool's Theory, I think they're called. It's one of the two that they announced in this giant roadmap that were external developers. I think it was codenamed Canis Majoris.
Oh, yeah.
So it's cool, I guess.
Yeah,
like, it's not CD Projekt Red doing it. It's a side thing. So cool. It's using Unreal Engine 5. It's like the same stuff that they're using to build the new Witcher game, or the new Witcher trilogy, I guess. So like, seems like a win. I don't have any bad thoughts about it.
It's one of the many remakes. But yeah, I think it's one that makes sense. One that's much smaller on the scale, but it's an interesting one, is Age of Empires 2, which is a remaster, and the new game 4, or newer game, finally coming to Xbox. The point here is more, why did these take so long to get to Xbox when Microsoft were very much, you can play on PC and Xbox whenever you want, and then they came out with stuff, mainly one of their big franchises in Age of Empires, being like, now that's PC only. Is it just because it takes, like, surely someone of the scale of Microsoft can throw enough money at this to get an Xbox version quicker than this?
Well, I tried to ask, so back when I went to London in 2019, Shannon Loftus of World's Edge, she's now retired, she was like heading Age of Empires 4. And even then, or they were about to, I can't remember, Xbox consoles had keyboard and mouse support, or were about to have keyboard and mouse support. And like everything they build is in that Play Anywhere architecture, because it wasn't, or was it Game Pass at the time? I can't remember. You get where I'm going with this. Like, so why don't you take this game and at least put it on Xbox and make people play with a keyboard and mouse if you can't map controller? And I don't think she really had an answer, to be honest. That was anything that I accepted. so cool. It's like it's good, I guess, and you'll have proper controller support, or you can just slap a keyboard and mouse on and just play like you're on a PC. So like good in the end, but I'm not sure why it took so long.
I don't get why it's like, even if it's, I get why they kind of have to say that if you're on Xbox, you need to have controller support. Like that makes sense to me. But surely they could just, it's not going to take, if like someone the scale of Microsoft long to add that feature in, it's not going to take them years.
And you look at things like
Civ
or The Sims that have controller support. So like that's how you map whatever you need to do on the keyboard and mouse. Like it's just someone has to do it, and it shouldn't have been what 3-4 years in the making to do it. 2.
I think 3. A lot of people, a lot of people won't play these now because they feel like old games, and it's old games coming to Game Pass. Oh yeah, if these had launched in it, it would have been much more exciting. Hopefully, this is kind of the end of games that are on one platform or the other. Now they're more true to their word that you can play on PC or Xbox day one, no matter what the franchise.
Yeah, well, like even Gears Tactics, like how that was a staggered release, but only took months. So let's just make it.
Not a fan of the staggered release.
Yeah, exactly. The last remake or remaster, it's not even a remake or remaster, it's just like an up-resing. Fallout 4 gets a current gen update next year?
Yeah, next year. Weird to announce it so early. Do we need this?
No. Fallout 4 was okay, but like
fine.
Play Fallout 3.
Yeah.
Don't play 76.
Fallout 3 should get some more love. Don't play 76. At least all those other games we just spoke about are like full remakes, going to be sold at maximum price. This one is just free. If you've got the game already, you get to play a better version of it. I don't think that's ever a bad thing. Like that's always good if they want to do that. I imagine this is because Bethesda only have so many games and they're going to be sitting on Game Pass forever. And they want to just kind of have some of them having an Xbox Series XS logo on them and playing well. And if you're on PlayStation, you'll get the upgrade as well. I imagine if you wanted to play this, you played it already.
And it might get some people excited for Starfield or something. Like, here's the general idea of how this is going to work, except it's not in space.
Yeah, certainly not excited for Fallout 5. That's going to be some time away.
I'm not even excited for Elder Scrolls 5. If I'm 4? 6? 6.
6. You've had 5 for a long time. Yeah.
That is also
Todd
on
Howard's going to be
fridges. So yes, I should know that.
Well, how old is Todd? He's a young-looking man, and he always has that snazzy leather jacket, which sells like crazy every time he's on stage. But he'd be like 50-something, right? So
I don't think he'll be around by the time Fallout 5 comes out. Like, not he'll be around. He'll be alive. he'll be retired, or just at least not at Bethesda. Is what I meant.
Heard it here first. Killing off Todd Howard. Sorry, Todd.
Speaking of killing off things, I would imagine that the price tag of $340 Australian could potentially kill DualSense Edge sales. That is the price of Sony's Elite competitor
Flagship
controller, Pro controller, depending on what you want to call it, with fancy back buttons and interchangeable sticks and things.
It gives you the edge. Is that why they called it this? Like, why didn't they just call it DualSense Pro? It would match the PS5
Nintendo
Pro
had that.
Doesn't exist yet.
Why didn't they call it Elite? Because Xbox had that. That's how they've called it the Edge. I think.
Gives you the edge. Okay. It is very expensive. So to compare, the Elite 2 proper is $250, or the cheaper one is $190. So they're very expensive controllers as well. $340 though is pushing it. It's getting in that scuff territory. It's half the console's cost. I don't know if so I like Pro controllers, and I mainly for shooters and kind of first person games. I think they work really well. I use the back buttons for changing my sticks, left stick and right stick on the back. I think it works well, and I do adjust the tension on the sticks as well. I think the DualSense has enough customizable or enough features in it already, but it doesn't really need a second controller to the same degree that Xbox did. So like it has the trigger locks as well if you only want to partially press down the triggers, but then that kind of conflicts with the whatever it's called, the
haptic feedback,
whatever it is. So that's where you're playing a game and the left trigger kind of locks on you. You can only half press it down. You need to put a lot of force in to push it down more. And I do like that in shooters. Like I kind of find it, you can kind of rest your finger on the trigger and partially start pressing it, and then you need to force more to fire. When it works well. But that totally conflicts with being able to kind of lock at 3 different stages. Like you need a game that doesn't use that functionality at all to make that worthwhile. The buttons on the back, they're good. But the DualSense, what was it called? The DualShock 4 had an attachment which allowed you just to add them on. I kind of wish they just did that instead, and that's all I would need. But if you play a lot of PlayStation, I think it's probably worthwhile. It is super expensive though.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if there's like scuff alternatives or like third-party ones that are like sort of the same thing, but not. I don't know.
It has been, yeah.
I don't do anything different to like this Xbox Elite. I just like the weight of it compared to the normal controller, and and now like this is my fancy customized one with the blue on it.
You design labbed it.
Yes. Well, I got a code from Microsoft to design lab one. There's not a lot of customization options, to be honest, in this compared to the normal controllers, which is kind of sad. So like I just wanted to make the D-pad the same blue that I have for my achievement toasts and stuff. And always, like, pro tip, go the metallic options if you can. Yeah, it's all right. The thing that I found with this Core controller, so there's the Elite 2, which is the black one, and then there's the Elite Core, which is generally the white one, but now you can design lab it and do whatever you want. Like, playing the likes of the Chant, when there's, like, controller rumble, like, something in it just vibrates really hard and makes a really high-pitched, like, constant...
I found that with all my Elite controllers, but you can turn it down
it's a different
settings.
It's a different thing. It's hard to describe. Like, I've like played the same games on the black Elite, not Core, and it's not as... It's, like, subdued in terms of sound. So I don't know. There's something in the new ones that are... It's, like, a little bit different.
They did say that they'd changed some mechanics to make them more durable, but then some teardowns online kind of showed that they maybe have done nothing. I hope they have. So I bought a Core, and going back to my Black Elite 2, I bought a second Core because I realized I can't use that anymore because the right bumper is ruined and the back paddles, 2 of them don't really work. I need to keep mashing it for it to work, and the thing's peeling again. These controllers are not durable at all, and that's been the problem since the Elite 1, which was even worse. So I'm kind of hoping the Core is a little bit better. It is cheaper at least, so like you can get them for cheaper than $190. I got mine for $150.
And if you've had 3 in the past, you have all the attachments and extra bits lying around your house that you can just substitute in.
Huge criticism of the Core. Ridiculous that they didn't put 2 paddles in. What does the little bits of metal cost Microsoft? 10 cents each? Like, they've basically the thing which this adds that I think most people would use. Most people wouldn't necessarily use the trigger locks a lot. They might not change the sticks. They might not use the charger. No one uses the case. I don't know why you need that. So chuck all that stuff away. Fair enough. But the back paddles, like even if they just added 2 instead of the 4, and it was like now you need, or even if they sold them separately, you can just buy the paddles for $10. You don't need to buy the whole $80 kit. Absolutely ridiculous decision to not include them, and I don't get it. Why they like? If you're going to take away something, take away the USB-C cable. People probably have that already. It doesn't make any sense.
Interchangeable thumbsticks. There's like texture on them, but I wear that texture off in a month, and to the point where like it's raised. But when I finish with these thumbsticks, it's like just fully smooth and flat. And I think if you want to get them from Microsoft as part of that package, it's like $60 or something. You can go on eBay and get like just completely knock off stuff for like $5 and get like 10 sets of thumbsticks. And I've bought those and they're fine. So if you want to try paddles and that kind of thing, just go on Amazon and look at some options, check out some reviews, just make sure they're a little bit legit. And hopefully it's not like dodgy reviews that are just being paid to say, yes, they're great. But like worst case scenario, you're spending like 10 or $15 on something that would normally cost you 60, and they're probably going to do the same thing. That's my advice.
Maybe I still did this. When I sent back my like 3rd Elite 1 because it kept breaking, I sent it with the wrong D-pad on there, and I just got back the one I already had. So I didn't have the proper ones to swap. And so you can go in there and start a warranty order, but do it for the accessory, not for the controller. And the accessories for this controller are the paddles and the interchangeable sticks and whatever. And at the time, it was like $20 to just get those shipped to me again, like new ones of those. Now, whether they've closed that loophole or whether you can just spend $20 to get the legit Microsoft ones by starting a warranty order, you just don't get the case and the charger. If that still works, do that.
Do you like the satellite or the D-pad? I can't remember.
Until now, I've been using the D-pad, but I've just swapped to the satellite to give it a try.
Satellite's better. I like the satellite. I was going to say something else, but I forget. Oh, yeah, like I went through like 4 Elite ones. The grips always peeled off. On the 1 and the 2, I've always broken the right bumper. Like every single controller that I have
Always been dodgy.
I've always just popped off. The right bumper is just broken. Though weirdly, my husband has had the same Elite 1 controller. He plays less than I do, but he plays fairly regularly. He still has it, and the grips are starting to peel now. And I have to kind of tell him, I think maybe I gave him one of mine from warranty that came, but he's had the same controller the whole time. And he's like, well, I just want another one of these. I'm like, well, they don't make those. They make this new one. And he's like, I don't like this. I'm like, what if we customized it and made it purple? He's like, no, I still don't want it. I'm like, well, you're not going to have a choice soon. Please get used to it.
I reckon you might be able to send it in and they'll send you another one back. Worth a try. You have to pay them.
Maybe I can beg Microsoft. My marriage depends on it. Please give me an Elite one.
Dig one out. They've probably got mounds of broken ones, which is everything failing on it. Which brings us to, are these worth the money? So I would kind of say, generally speaking, if you play a lot, and especially if you're going to use the back buttons and you're going to potentially use the trigger locks, and only recently changed the tension, so you get a little tool that gives you kind of basically the top level looseness, which is the same as an Xbox One controller, a mid-tier, or kind of tighter, which is more like a 360 controller. And I'm going to assume that that's the DualSense Edge will be similar. I use the loosest one on my left stick to move around. That's what I'm used to. And I use kind of the middle one on my right stick, because when you're shooting in a first-person game, I think it gives you a little bit more precision. And that's what I use the controller for. I don't use it for every game. Basically, first-person shooters and anything that I have to run a lot in, I use it for. And I think it is worth it. I just wish they were more durable. And that's why I wanted an Elite 3. I didn't want the core, really. I'd prefer we've redesigned it again. And this one, third time's a charm. And I hope the DualSense, for way more money again, is going to last. Like, I would expect that controller to last daily use for 5 years. Like, it's for $340. You're not just paying for the functionality. You're paying for the durability and the quality. And that's what Microsoft has not delivered. They've delivered a great controller, but not one that's really worth it.
And I know this is controversial because I've had a fairly good run with my Elite 2s as compared to the Elite 1. But I think that the original Elite was far less durable than the 2. I still think there's a long way to go. Yeah. But I'm concerned that if people are spending $340 on this kind of like untested, untried accessory, I feel like the likelihood of it not going as well as people would hope is higher. So, like, I don't know, like, yes, give it a go. The good thing about the Elite controllers 1 or 2 is that Microsoft has a decent warranty on it. So any that I've really broken,
on the one
I've had replaced. Well, yeah, I guess I'm also me, and I'm prepared to beg them for an Elite 1, so I have a marriage. So maybe I got some special beneficial treatment. But yeah, like, if you're on the fence, maybe give it a little while and see how those reports are going. Like, if people are like, oh, I've had this for 2 weeks and it's like the thumbstick snapped off or whatever is going to happen, maybe wait until the next iteration.
That's why it's so hard to know for both the Elite 2 Core and the DualSense Edge. Is we really need to know, and we'll come back on this show and we'll tell you in probably 12 to 18 months, has it held up regular use? Are the grips peeling off? Does the right bumper work? Do the back button paddles still work? And it's clearly a durability issue. Like the back paddles that are broken in my Elite 2 are the ones, it's the left one that I use all the time. Constant sprinting, that's just smashing that button.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. So, and like I have to really jam it like 4 or 5 times and I've been shot in the head. So it's no
Can
good.
You set it to the one below? Because there's
that
2.
One's fully broken.
Oh.
There's 2. So to avoid the very annoying issue of no share button still, even though it physically has a share button, I've set the back 2 paddles that I don't use the buttons without any paddles on them. So without a paddle, it's just a circular button. It's just quite small and it's hard to reach. But I've assigned them to screenshot and video capture. And I I kept, so there they are. If you're watching
hard
the,
if you're on video, I tried to show them, but it didn't focus very well.
Why you'd be doing that?
Sorry.
So you can like claw around and hit it, and that's how I realized one was broken. I'm trying to like screenshot, and it's doing nothing. I'm like, oh, this doesn't work, but it wasn't that. It does work. It's just the button doesn't work. This is the tale of Elite controllers. I hope the DualSense Edge is better. It's outrageously expensive. The deal from EB Games that you get like $40 off to trade in your DualSense is a terrible deal. Their deals have been pretty good recently. Like I got $400 and something for my One X against the PS5. Like they used to have good trade-in for this stuff, but that one seems a bit dodgy. I'll almost definitely get one because at some point I'll need to play something on PlayStation. And I think I'm going to need that extra precision. I need the edge, Steve, over my competitors with my, I don't know. I don't really play multiplayer games that often on PlayStation, but I probably won't really need it for
You
God
need
of
to
War.
sprint, and you're not going to do it by clicking down the left thumbstick. That's for chumps.
No, I'm not. It's very uncomfortable. I don't know why every game has that.
Or at least a toggle. Would a toggle on sprint get away with your need for an Elite controller or an Edge controller?
I'm so used to it, and the right one as well. Like stab someone, quick melee attack is great. I know a lot of people. So Hamish, who writes for Stevivor, has mentioned that he uses the 4 face buttons, which is the default. It's what they want you to do. The 4 paddles, 4 face buttons, so you never have to take your finger off the right control stick. So you can jump and like twist in the air at the same time and reload. That's too much for me. That was overthinking it.
Fathom how that works with my fingers. I can't make it work in my head.
This is like when people said there was that photo of someone using a DualShock, and it was they had their 2 fingers on the 2 buttons, L1, L2, as opposed to just like, I don't know what you do, but I just use index fingers and I move between those 2 buttons. There's someone being like, doesn't everyone play like this? The
like
double
you're shooting
fingers?
a pretend gun, right? Like pew 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 pew, and you just move.
Kind of.
Well, yeah.
But it's so you've got like your middle finger and your index finger on L1, L2, and R1, R2, like that. So you've got them ready to go.
Is that how you do it?
Fair, that's not what I do.
That's weird.
Some people do. I bet you someone listening to this does that because it gives you the edge. But maybe if you just had the Edge controller, you wouldn't need the Edge. It's great. That's almost impossible on an Xbox controller. It's so uncomfortable. DualSense, not very comfortable either. DualShock, it kind of could work. It's like just you're too cramped in there. Yeah, that's.
I'm doing it. And my shoulders are up to my ears, and like there's no reason why, but like that's just how it works. I can't relax now.
It feels claustrophobic. It feels jammed in. I don't know. It was a few months ago that came up on. It must have been Twitter or Instagram or something. It was a bit of like a doesn't everyone play like this type of thing? No. Crazy.
No. Well, if you get one, let us know how you go. We'd be keen to hear the good and the bad. If you handle it like a weirdo with your fingers and weird, what's the contortions? That's not a word.
You're like clawing it up. Let us know how you use them. I mean, I use the left stick, right stick back paddles, but there must be other ways to use it.
I don't use back paddles. I honestly just like the extra weight of the Elite. It just feels, I don't know. I just like it. It feels expensive, maybe. I hope it's not just that. But it could be.
It does feel expensive when it breaks. Yeah.
Well, all right. Are we done? A good show's a short show.
We're done.
All right.
Yeah.
I think you had a question for me.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't have a question for you. I have a future episode, baby. I'm giving you thinking time for about 2 weeks. I need some tips on what I should be doing in Japan when I go there. So I need to start booking. It's coming up soon. Normally we wouldn't chat holiday plans on this show, but it's the easiest time for me to get information out of you. And I feel like Japan is like it's the spiritual home of games anyway. It's where Nintendo is. It's where PlayStation is. It's relevant enough that you can tell me all the good things I should be doing.
Yes.
Probably not Nintendo World.
I have nothing in my brain, but I don't think you've ever been around and I've run into Alex and Yell. Or known to the internet as CVX Freak from the aforementioned Code Veronica X. I read his guides as a child when he was a child, when he wrote guides for Game Facts for for RE Code Veronica. And he's like the nicest guy. He works for Limited Run Games. He is my friend. He is fun. He's been on this podcast. We had a Resident Evil Village show with him on it. He's great. I I would recommend you hang out with him, go for dinner or something. But you don't know him, so maybe not. But
No,
I'll
it's
maybe
probably not
start
gonna slot in.
seeding the introductions or something. We'll see how we go.
This is it's why I'm giving you time to think about it. The main thing I want is how do I say like this beer so I don't make a fool of myself with the correct pronunciations and the other ones as well.
Asahi. It's all the syllables are the same duration. Asahi.
Okay.
And people, I'm sure there are Japanese people being like, "What the hell is this guy saying right now? He is destroying our language." I will give it some thought. I will give it more thought beyond James May, Our Man in Japan, which I'm still watching very slowly, and it's very good. James
I might
May,
just watch that again.
Sumimasen. We just got to that one where he's like a train station jingle. Anyway,
I'll learn that.
That's my tip. Watch that show. It's great. Anyway, there's so much happening. We'll have time to talk about Japan. We're going to talk about games until the end of the year, including the Game Awards, which were a voting judge outlet yet again. So we can talk about stuff when it's free to do so. I'm not sure when those dates align, but we'll get there. We'll talk about Stevivor's Games of the Year. We'll talk about things like Ragnarok. It's exciting times. And while we're waiting for that, how do we find what you have to say on games and Japan and internet and dogs and whatever else?
Well, you'll find my, hopefully by now, fully completed Modern Warfare 2 review on Stevivor. Hopefully that was almost completed by the last episode, but I didn't think I quite made it. I might be somewhere else on the internet. I don't know. I'm Grillis on all the various gaming platforms. Who knows which social media I'm on by this point in the cycle of life. So much is changing in the social landscape at the moment that I don't know which platform I'm on currently.
Exactly.
Where do we find you?
S-Right, AU. If something is toppled and something else has taken its place, I'll be trying to get that and the Stevivor handles on whatever new thing exists that, as per last week, is not Truth Social because we have standards. That's it. We will see you, I think, to round out November next week. Yes, because it's still November. I don't know what time is anymore. I'm tired.
There's at least 2 more weeks of November. So we'll be back for at least. There's so much. There's Ragnarok. There's Pokemon something. There's some Sonic game. There's Devil in Me. There's a bunch of games. There's actually quite a lot coming out in November. It's a busy time.
Tired already, but we'll see you next week.
Yeah.